Hello, sir. Very good morning.
Hi, good morning. So, how are you? Is everything going fine?
Yeah, everything going great. Thank you. So, this is a very special edition because we are trying to compile the insights from the industry leaders and the academic experts like yourself on the emerging trends on sustainability and what all are the facets, whether it is from the strategic point of view or the ecosystem level point of view, or the multifunctional directions at which the efforts have to really scale up in order to accelerate the pace of sustainable development. So, from that perspective, one of the most important areas is, of course, technology, because technology has a really important role to play when it comes to creating, the new paradigms as well as new solutions for existing problems within sustainability domain. So I would like to actually start off with the very fundamental question on what exactly will be the most important principle when it comes to integration of technology and sustainability, as per you.
Yeah, I personally believe it's always going to be reduce, reuse, recycle kind of technologies. I
Okay.
think these are the three R's which finally decide whether whether the Earth is going to survive all this onslaught or not. And
Mhm.
here the technologies will play a very great role. And I also believe as a researcher we have so much to learn from the nature.
Yeah.
And nature is so harmless. Output of one process goes as input for the another for input to
Mm.
another process. I
Mm.
think that we have completely abandoned. All technologies that we develop leave a trail in the nature, and I think that way we will never be sustainable. I think the technologies need to adapt this nature's way of doing things, and
Mm.
there are efforts now in that direction. There are multiple efforts. In fact, I am aware of, for example, simple things like, urea consumption in the country. I think we need to take up some of these problems which are on a very large scale, polluting the environment, and then see how we can find sustainable solutions. Recently, in fact, I was supporting, some of these activities in IFCO through various recognitions and other things. For example, one of the things they did was nano urea. They basically made urea in the nano form, and that in the nano form they found that the plant absorbs much better as compared to conventional urea, and with
Okay.
that they could actually reduce the urea consumption by 50%. There will
Okay.
be a reduction of 50%, and what is a huge bag of urea, they can make it into a 500 ml of urea. That's almost like 500 kgs or something like that, they said. And so in the process now they are reducing the urea consumption in the fields, and that could also save the subsidy bill for the government of India. Like, according to their calculations, if the conventional urea is replaced by this nano urea, which is more effective,
Right.
you save something like 22,500 crores, per year as a subsidy. And you also save the planet because plant only absorbs a small fraction of what you put in the earth, and
Right.
the rest of it is all, it just stays there in the.
Contaminating the soil.
I think these are the kinds of solutions, where technology can be greatly helpful. I think those are the kind of things that we need to be working on in whatever field that we work. I think these are the large scale problems if we can address through such elegant solutions. I think things will definitely become better.
Great. Actually, that was very well sought example because I was going to ask you the next thing because we have been reading about this green nano, right? So within that we have like two kinds of usages, I would say. So one would be about the production of nano products in a sustainable manner, which is more conscious about environment and societies. And the second will be the production of nano solutions that will be coming from two directions. One is the products and solutions that are directly, through technology, using the technology, are going to solve the problems. And second will be those are kind of enablers or helping the existing processes and technologies in solving it better. So this was a brilliant example, as you quoted. Any other such, for instance, I will make one reference that I actually read about in 2008. And that was one of the very early instances when I was very, uh, intrigued by the concept of sustainability and application of technology in this space, especially nanotechnology, I would say. That was about the paint, the whole chemical equation of paint, and how nanotechnology can help us come up with such artificial paints that will be as good as artificial, that will be able to perform artificial photosynthesis. So it will be as good as the the properties of a plant, the way you absorb sunlight and then you make chlorophyll, and in the process you're absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. So that kind of effect can be produced through a artificial coat of paint. So any such examples that you may want to probably highlight, that would be great.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that is one. I mean, there are a lot of science fiction kind of things, but I
Yeah.
think all science fiction eventually becomes a reality.
Mm.
I don't think anything will remain as a science fiction for too long, the way the science is advancing. But I think those kind of paints, nano paints are there now. You can actually buy them in the market. And but most of these paints today are to replace the conventional paints, and these paints bring additional benefits in terms of antimicrobial property, or many of these paints also tend to have for example, very high hydrophobicity. So in the process, if you coat buildings with these paints, then water doesn't really stick. So during the monsoon time, the buildings won't degrade so much. Otherwise, if you see places like Bombay, one monsoon and all paints are gone, and all buildings have that shabby kind of a look. And so those sort of paints are already available in the market. And but the kind of paints which in a way mimic the photosynthesis process, I think they are still some time away, but eventually I'm sure they will all become a reality. But like I was saying, the technology can provide solutions to these large scale kind of degradation that is happening all over. The nano urea is one example, but even the transportation sector, I think
Mm.
there we have so much that can be really done. And in fact, India
Right.
has very aggressive targets. By 2030, they are saying how much, something like 50% of the electricity will be met from the renewables kind of a thing. Actually, that is a very bold sort of a thing. And in order to do that, I think so many things need to change. But again, there nano or whatever technologies that we can think of, I think can be very helpful. For example, one major requirement for academic institutions is, on the coal-based kind of technologies today, there are at least 20 million people, depending for their livelihoods. And now, if you suddenly, in 10 years' time, if you are going to renewables, what will happen to all these 20 million people? How do you, reskill them for these newer sectors? I think that is again a place where a lot of technology interventions, and a lot of even educational institutions taking up some of these issues will become important. And
Right.
also, if we, even the transport sector, I think it eventually needs to get its electricity from the renewables, and
Right.
that actually is a tall order. And building those kind of charging stations, and even modernizing the grid, which again is such a major task, because if everybody now is connecting to the grid, all the energy that they are generating, and by 2030, if it is going to be 500 gigawatts kind of a thing, I don't think the current grid will really be able to withstand that. There again, a lot of technology, innovations are required. I think, to me, the problem needs to be addressed at a level where it will, have an impact. The smaller things, of course, are required, and, there are all fun kind of gadgets which we can put some small solar and start using that. But,
Hmm.
agriculture is one sector, transportation is another sector. And I think these are the kinds of sectors where any intervention can actually show up as a very important sort of a.
Large scale impact. Yeah.
For example, at IIT Delhi, we did this moving to the hydropower from the normal coal power. And
Mm.
that way, to the institute, we started buying from Himachal Pradesh, the hydropower. and that immediately reduced our carbon footprint by how much? Some 14,000 tons kind of a thing. That's what that time we actually calculated. And
Okay.
because we have all these rooftops, we also installed 2 megawatts of solar and another 2 megawatts, that way total 50% of our electricity today is coming from hydro or electric. And that has definitely saved at least 20,000 tons of carbon emissions. But this, every campus in the country doing that, I think, these are the ways that we need to, move towards that sustainable kind of a planet. And, even in terms of the newer technologies, the nano definitely has that sort of a, power to really revolutionize some of these sectors. And even the overuse of water, so the in agriculture, in fact, in Bombay or in the Maharashtra region, when I was at IIT Bombay, we were told that 85% of water in agriculture in Maharashtra goes for agriculture.
Agriculture.
Only
Yeah.
15% is for human consumption.
The
Now,
national average is 70%, so of course that will be the norm.
exactly. And they also said that, even 50% of that water is wasted because farmers don't pay electricity bills, so they keep the pumps on and, those sort of things. And they think water is an abundant kind of a resource. But
Right.
unfortunately, India doesn't have enough water. So we actually worked on a technology where, simple soil moisture sensors. And these moisture sensors will for a particular crop, you can optimize them. And with these moisture sensors, you can actually now, control the sprinklers. And that way they turn off as soon as the moisture reaches a certain kind of a value. And those sort of simple solutions, which started as BTech projects, now we have been able to commercialize it as a startup. And these sort of technologies implemented on a large scale can save so much of water, which is currently used in the agriculture sector. I think these are simple solutions, and these technologies are available. And even even how much of fertilizer to use in a farm today is decided by what the farmer thinks and what others are using. It's all not really very scientific way they decide how much of fertilizer to use for a particular crop. And again, the soil health monitoring systems, monitoring the nitrate, phosphate, potassium, doing it in the field itself, and advising the farmer based on these actual measurements, that what the soil actually requires, and put it in the right proportion. I think these sort of technologies are not difficult to develop at all. My company Soil Sense is actually now is in the market with those NPK sensors, and they have developed these soil moisture sensors which can reduce water wastage. These are the kinds of things, these are the kinds of interventions that are required. But it's not, often just the technology that solves these problems. Even the adaptation of these technologies in
Of
India,
course.
that's again a major challenge. And that is where the government supports are required. NGOs and others playing a bigger role is important, because farmers are not uh, sometimes willing to pay for these sort of technologies, or sometimes they cannot even pay because their income levels are all very low. I think that is where some of these subsidies need to be going actually. Rather than subsidizing, something which is polluting the environment, I think some of these
Yeah.
subsidies,
Yeah.
eventually need to be directed to sectors where you can, or directed to technologies, where the adaptation through those subsidies can improve. And that way you will, impact the earth in a positive way. I think some of these are actually required. And I hope all of that requires a very concerted kind of an effort. Some technology is getting developed and expecting that everybody will use it is not going to happen. I was very fortunate that I was very happy to actually see that that IFCO nano urea technology has been taken up in a major way by government of India. Even Honorable Prime Minister Modi in his Man Ki Baat, he mentioned about this nano urea development. And now they are very aggressively building plants to actually produce nano urea in large quantities. And now they are able to distribute them to the farmers. And I think these are the kinds of efforts that are required. The technology and policy going hand in hand,
Hand in hand.
the only way you can actually solve these problems. Otherwise, technologies alone will not help, and policies alone may not be very effective.
No, absolutely. Very well said. And that is the reason why, even at BuzzOnEarth, I'm sure that you are aware of it because you have been in our advisory board, that we generally talk about three levels of interventions. One is at the governance level, that includes all the policies and governance and the structures that are required. Second will be the behavioral interventions, because as you said, even just development of technology and induction of that technology is not going to sort out the problem until and unless it is widely adopted, and that has several market forces that come into play, and there is a strategic attempt to make it more mainstream, otherwise it will remain as a invention that is only published in the publications, right? So, and the third one remains the interventions at the grassroots level, where we talk about operational and infrastructure level interventions and implementation. So we are very uh, so these are the three levels of interventions that we are actually very keen to support and also see the kind of developments in these areas. But one thing that comes to mind when we talk about technology, so we can probably say technology has several ways in order to be an enabler. It, as you were saying, sensing, measurement, these kind of things can be one area. Second could be digitization, right? Just by digitizing several process. So basically, it's a kind of process optimization by using digitization and using digital technologies. The third will be on the behavioral aspects. How do we insert technology? Do we have any good examples on that front? Because we are knowing most of it from the bird's eye level view on these areas where it is about coming up with a product or coming up with a sensing or measurement device. But when it comes to behavioral adoption, we are not seeing too many examples over there. So, any insights on that?
It's a very important point. In fact,
Yeah.
we this IIT Delhi example, we started building these air-conditioned hostels, and but the general tendency is for students to keep the windows open, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then don't turn off the AC when they go for classrooms. They think that you charge on a monthly basis, and so therefore you don't really think that you are saving money for by turning off something. I think
Yeah.
those sort of things. How do you change them? And it's a cultural issue, and they don't really feel so much part of the system. But in those cases, one thing is to have individual meters, and so we started to put these digital meters in every room so that you are
Okay.
actually and you charge them. So that if you basically charge these meters with, let's say, 1,000 rupees, and you use that AC until that 1,000 rupees is exhausted. I think these are the kinds of things that we need to finally implement. I think at some point that enforcement is required. The
Right.
behavioral change, coupled with some kind of an enforcement, I think
Hmm.
is the only way the behavior will get will also become kind of a permanent sort of a thing. I think once they follow that sort of a thing, initially you might force them to do that because by all these technology kind of means, but at the end of the day, after some time probably it will become a kind of a pattern. I think that needs to go hand in hand. Otherwise, the same people who are in India, they behave very differently when they go to US. There it's simply because there is, that if you violate some rule, somebody will come and catch you and you can get into a trouble. I think just that fear that somebody can catch you is what makes people to behave. When they drive on US roads, they are very disciplined and all of that, but you come here and then nothing like that happens. I think some of these, I would think, instead of just relying on preaching and expecting people to behave in a certain way, we also need to use technologies as a way to enforce some of this behavior so that it becomes a habit over a period of time. I think right now we are in the transition phase. It also needs that education from the school level. I
Right.
think that again hasn't been happening as much as what one would like to. The ethics, the morals, all of them need to be taught from the on kindergarten level onwards, and
Hmm.
that unfortunately is not part of the school curriculum even now. And how to behave when you are outside, and how to do certain things in a society. I think all of that need to be taught in a particular way, and unfortunately, that hopefully that will happen more and more. And I think that, in addition to more enforcement at all levels, I think is the only way, some discipline will come into the society, and we will start worrying about the bigger issues, and not everything concerning I, me, myself kind of a thing.
No, very well said. And this is also the point that probably when you talk about, say, enforcement, that if we can couple that with the technology front, for instance, if you're talking about individual meters or individual sensors, then maybe if there is a way that increases the tariff the moment you probably hike your consumption beyond a point, so it should be automated. So I'm just thinking in terms of technology, we can probably try and impact the behavioral issues as well in a way that it is spiking and it is basically punishing those who are abusing the infrastructure and basically incentivizing those who are being responsible.
Air conditioners which even sense if people are there in the room and turn off on their own. I think these are not difficult technologies. You don't even have to violate any privacy, because you're actually not putting any cameras or anything there. There are other ways to know if a person is there inside the room, and then based on that you turn off the AC. So some of these technologies need to be integrated into all these modern appliances. I think not much of customization is taking place in all these consumer electronics when it comes to India.
That's right.
Whatever is sold, for example, in Korea, is also the same thing that is sold in India. Recently, for example, I was buying some refrigerator. You see these refrigerators with half the refrigerator with the deep freezers. Now, in Indian society, you have such a tall refrigerator with half of it, being the deep freezer. India doesn't use, in countries where the meat and other consumption is so high, you want to store all of that. In India, what do you keep in the deep freezer? As much as what you would want to keep in the other side. So I think these are the kinds of technologies. Even I was also recently talking about that desktops with a 10-minute sort of uninterrupted power supply. If you can integrate simple lithium ion batteries in a desktop, that when there is a power failure, even in IIT, suddenly you are in the middle of a meeting and for 5 minutes the power is gone. And when that power is gone, then you have to, the desktop reboots, your Wi-Fi is gone, and it causes you almost a 20 minutes of disturbance kind of a thing. But instead, if there is a 10-minute battery backup for the Wi-Fi, a 10-minute battery backup for the desktop, it will save so much of headache for everybody. But these companies, which have been marketing these products in India, they are not really developing them for the Indian conditions. I think that is where some of these modern appliances, even from the modernizing them, or even the optimizing them for the Indian behavioral point of view, so that you also keep the overall the planetary aspects in mind. I think that would have saved a lot of headache for many people. Like what I was saying, saving water is one thing, and saving electricity. I think some of these we are relying too much on the behavioral kind of pattern changes, but behavioral changes take a generation, and I don't think we have so much of time. The way the global warming is happening right now, I don't think we can wait for another 50 years to expect that everybody will
Not
behave
at all.
one way. I think
Yeah.
a more stricter enforcement and use of technologies at every level, to enforce, some of these
Yeah.
sort of aspects. In my opinion, you can reduce the time to 5 to 10 years kind of a period. So, which is what we need to be doing. I think that urgency needs to come in everywhere, in my opinion.
So very good example that you just stated about batteries, because that was the next thing I wanted to talk about. Since you have been leading one of the most well-known institutions, technology institutions of the country, that is IIT Delhi, you must be already exposed to and you must be also steering a lot of researches and innovations in this field. I personally believe that when it comes to energy related innovations, one of the dire need that the country has is about batteries and the storage capacity that we can have. It's not just limited to the kind of inventions in creating new kinds of batteries. It is also about increasing the capacity. It is also about having the right kind of disposal ability. And all of these things have to be very well thought through. As you rightly said, some thought has to be applied while designing these innovations and solutions, that there is a life cycle to it, there is the kind of customers that will be using it. All of that thought needs to be put in. So considering the booming EV market under Shri Gadkari ji, I think a lot of reforms have happened in this field. And I'm sure a lot of innovations and research papers are also being published in this area. So would love to hear from you, what is the most cutting edge solutions in this field so far proposed?
Yeah. In fact, we recognize the need for indigenous solutions for electric vehicles, electric charging. At IIT Delhi, about 3 years ago, we started a new Center for Automotive Research and Tribology, and that entire center we said will focus on electric vehicles, and so which will look at all aspects of electric vehicle adaptation in the country and the technologies that are required, and a set of 20 faculty and almost 200 PhD students will work on the electric vehicle technology. So that was the vision we had when we started the center. The center is coming up very well. It has recruited many top-notch faculty. They have also got the industry contacts in almost all the major electric vehicle vendors right now. They are working on multiple aspects. One is this battery swapping technology, and so you don't really own any battery. You basically use it to go to a supermarket and replace your battery with other the fresh batteries. I think that is a kind of a model that we need to move to. The battery swapping technology, in my opinion, is something which is definitely more suited for a country like India. Otherwise, where do you dispose your battery? I don't think anybody even bothered about how to dispose the batteries. Everyone just puts it in their dustbin, hoping that somebody will come and pick it up, and eventually all that lithium and everything entering, ending up in the soil will have a very long term kind of issues. I think we need to start moving to the situation of nobody owns any battery. I think battery should be owned by the companies which are making it, and eventually all of them need to go back to them. I think that is a recycle kind of a model we need to develop, and that again requires some policy interventions. So when I like this battery swapping is one thing which will definitely work very well for the two-wheelers. There is no need for a two-wheeler person to keep the same battery all the time. You remove it and then replace it with another good battery, and finally when the vehicle life is over, you of course only sell the vehicle without the battery, because the battery again can be taken from any vending machine kind of a thing. I think for two wheelers, which is India is one of the largest markets for two wheelers, I think we should go ahead with those swapping technologies and not making people buy the batteries separately. And for cars, it will be difficult, but I think there again we need policies. But cars, the batteries anyway cannot be removed. Eventually, to dispose of a car, you will have to go to a vendor and sell it to somebody, and that person, hopefully with the proper regulations and all that, the battery will be separately disposed of. But otherwise, if we don't do that, India now almost targeting heavy usage of electric vehicles. What they're all saying, some 30%, 50% of electric vehicles by 2030, 2035. I think that will be a disaster for the soil. I mean, if all these batteries are just disposed of without any proper care, I think so much of lithium getting into the soil will be very bad, because it all gets into water eventually, and we are the ones, the people get affected by that. And I think again this requires technology and policy. The battery swapping technology is not a big deal. I mean, the technologies can be made ready, but it has to again go as a policy, and and setting up those vending machines at every petrol pump. So while you are driving, you go to the petrol pump where you also charge your electric vehicle. You also replace your battery. I think that is a model.
Excellent idea. Yeah, that can be very easily done also, and that will really serve the purpose.
In fact, every petrol pump needs to become, needs to service the EVs also. Otherwise, setting up separate EV units and all that probably, is going to be difficult. And we all know where the petrol pumps are, and there should always be a section in the petrol pump where I can charge my vehicle, or I can, replace my battery for the two-wheeler, and move on. I think these things need to be mandated.
Yeah, I remember we had come to when we had come to IIT Delhi last month. The problem that we faced was we were in an EV that was Hyundai Kona, and though it has a very long this thing, but I think the charge was out, so we had to really wait for about 1 hour there around CP area just to ensure that the car is charged because it's not. I mean, being the capital city, we are not having that many charging stations and points where we could get the vehicle
IT
charged.
Delhi is also working on the EV charging stations.
Yeah.
We have developed a 20 kilowatt a smart EV charging station, and I think those technologies are now progressing pretty fast. And I think the charging time will be 10 minutes, 20 minutes eventually, and
Hmm.
that is the target right now. And mobile phones today, some of these phones which you see in the market can be charged 0 to 100% in 8 minutes. That is a record now for a mobile phone. In 8 minutes, you can charge the entire mobile phone. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing, will happen for the electric vehicles
Electric
too.
cars also, yeah.
Yeah. The cars, the only issue is the fast charging often, is detrimental to the battery life. So these two things, don't go hand in hand. But that is where technologies need to come in so that fast charging becomes a possibility in India. Unless that happens, I don't think the electric vehicle market will really pick up so much. And but I think things are on the way right now. Even in the US now, it only takes a few half an hour kind of a thing to charge that. When you, I think the future petrol, the gas stations will be, you go there, you have something to entertain yourself and you do some shopping, and then while you are doing that, your car also is getting charged. And I think, those sort of models will pick up now sooner or later. And I think all of these need to, go hand in hand. Otherwise, we will get stuck with, existing technologies. And also, electric vehicles, again, drawing power from coal, you wouldn't have solved any problem. You are again as bad as, what it would have been. But the
Yeah.
electric vehicles, therefore, need to draw their power from the renewable sources. But that again is hopefully, as part of the Paris Agreement, by 2030, 50% electricity is coming from renewables. I
Yeah.
think we also would have addressed that problem. So
Yeah.
India has grand ambitions, grand plans, and but I hope the implementation will happen the way we all
Yeah.
expect it.
So
So
one thing which has been very consistently clear through all the responses that you have been sharing so far is that there has to be policy and governance related what you say interventions that have to go hand in hand with any new technology. So that has to be somewhere embedded with the technology integration or broadcasting of any such solutions. So since this kind of report as well as this video will be shared with several such policymakers and the people in the governance also, what would be top three suggestions that you would like to make on that front?
I think our our top institutions today, the technology institutions like IITs,
Yeah.
we don't have strong policy programs.
Okay.
We think with technology we can solve all the problems. We never, bother to create more technology and more policy kind of programs in our institutions. We tried to correct it at IIT Delhi. In fact, again, about 3 years ago, we started a new school of public policy, and we got in people from the top-notch people from all over the world, from Harvards and MITs, and make them start this school. And the school is doing very well. In fact, last year we started a master's in public policy, and I think in an engineering institution such as IIT, I think developing these policies for the newer technologies that are going to come in, I think it needs to go hand in hand. I think it needs to happen on a larger scale. So I
Hmm.
think IITs have educational institutions, particularly our top ones, have a role to play in the technology policy kind of a sector. And also, I would think there needs to be some rating system. Right now we are in a situation where we are rating, practically everything, and even the countries are getting rated and all that. But we are not rating our industries on the sustainability metrics, and not on even the startups. If I want to fund a startup, I should also know where does this startup stand on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of the sustainability. I think, that again needs to, like I said, in India, the behavioral change is one thing, but the enforcement also can accentuate the behavioral changes, and what takes otherwise one full generation can happen in half a generation, and even a quarter of generation. I think for that to happen, the enforcement needs to go hand in hand. I think, to me, Niti Aayog kind of agencies, starting to rank all these unicorns, all the startups, and linking the startup funding from government to the sustainability aspects. For example, if I have started an agricultural company and if I am making sensors, do I really worry about what will happen to the life of the, have I really bothered about the complete life cycle of these sensors? Now I am
Correct.
going to deploy them in the field everywhere,
Hmm.
thousands and millions of these sensors, and who is going to take them out and who is going to, dispose them off properly. And in many companies, they will deploy them and then they will remain there, and eventually, they will pollute the environment. And if I go to any government agency for support for my startup, I think I should, somebody should be rating me on my
Yeah.
sustainability, kind of on these sustainability metrics, and then provide me those funds. I think even the VC funding, even angel investor funding, all of that, needs to be linked to the sustainability metrics in at some places. I think.
On that, I have a good news to share that BuzzOnEarth is actually working on these frameworks. So for two sectors for sure, one is education sector and second is startups that we are working on.
Very good. In fact, I have taken a PhD student in our Department of Management Studies. She is very bright, and I have given this to her as a PhD problem along with a co-supervisor in our management school. I think, we are looking at now particularly these unicorns. We have something like 107, 110 unicorns. So can we develop metrics now to rank them or rate them on the sustainability kind of things? And I think some of these the things now need to become, common kind of aspects in every funding sort of a thing. And
Yeah.
also, I think government has a major role to play. While educational institutions will start working on the policy and other things, making them go hand in hand with the technologies, while we are also, enforcing some of these guidelines through ratings and some of these schemes. But I think at the end of the day, the buck stops with government when it comes to policy implementation or any enforcement related kind of aspects. I think, today, for example, that example I gave, an agriculture company has all the technologies required to save soil, either by reducing the water usage or reducing the fertilizer usage. But the farmers don't want to buy anything because, they are not interested in any of these. They think somebody will provide them water, somebody will provide them electricity, and the all the the fertilizers and other things are heavily subsidized, and they just go with whatever is the behavior that currently
Mhm.
exists in their community. So now, how do we ensure that some of these technologies actually are used by these small farmers? Because India is mostly the small farmers who are all holding 2 acre, 3 acre kind of lands, and how do we ensure that some of them make use of these technologies? No, I see the role for government there, and
Mm.
that is where we need to direct our subsidies. The subsidies need to go where the technologies can help save the planet, and or the reduce the carbon emissions. And
Right.
some of these companies need to be funded more aggressively from various government sources. For example, at IIT Delhi there are multiple technologies now, multiple startups which are using the agriculture waste and making nice products out of them. But
Mm.
again, the issue is, they are struggling to raise funds. They are struggling because, again, private investors, don't see so much of a profit margin in that.
Correct.
And there are again startups which are using these emissions from the vehicles, the carbon emissions, capture them and convert it into usable kind of products. For example, they make inks for laser printers
Yeah.
and inkjet printers out of
Mhm.
the emissions that come out of vehicles. I think some of these technologies now
Yeah.
need to be implemented
They
in
have to be
almost every.
mainstream. Yes.
Exactly. I think that is where I hope to see, government playing a more active role. And not every startup is the same, particularly the startups which are helping the sustainability aspects. I think need to be fast tracked in terms of their adoption, in terms of their the funding and other kind of things. And I think that is the kind of a encouragement one would like to see, from the government side. Otherwise, treating an e-commerce company and a technology company that is solving an issue in the field, I think, treating both of them similar is not going to happen, because the private investors will anyway prefer the e-commerce companies because they give them
Return
much
on
better and
investment.
faster returns. But in
Yeah.
the process, these deep tech kind of startups are all struggling right now. And I think, that is where I would like to see more and more role of, the
Hmm.
government agencies and the ministries. I think they all need to have a startup fund, every ministry, and start funding startups which are, trying to solve some of these larger problems.
Yeah, and that also maybe could be connected with the thought that you were saying. I'm just trying to articulate it in a more, clear way, that also somewhere probably we need to do environmental impact assessment or sustainability impact assessment for these policies, including the subsidies or anything that has a, voluminous impact, like anything that is going to be adopted at a massive scale. And only government has that kind of, capability to take things at the massive scale. So perhaps some level of assessment on that front may also be very helpful.
I agree with you. In fact, subsidizing diesel, making diesel cheaper compared to petrol for decades in this
Yeah,
country was not helping the
the
environment at
environment
all.
at all.
And, but at least this government has removed some of those. But I
Yes,
agree with you. Every policy needs to be, also rated based on its sustainability kind of aspects, and not everything can be just a populist kind of a thing. So.
great. So very, very important and helpful insights shared, sir. Thank you so much for your time. So would be happy to, hear from you. Maybe we'll have a continual, dialogue again, because technology is such a thing that there is always some or the other updation to it. And we will be able to continue this as a continuous exchange, also sharing the kind of developments in this front as discussed with you. And our intention is to ensure that these messages are not just compiled for the heck of publishing. It has to reach the right ears so that the right kind of changes do happen in the ecosystem.
No, in fact, one thing that just came to my mind, when we are looking at, some of these sectors which can have a large scale impact, agriculture is of course one, but even construction. The
Cons-
cement is again, one of the major polluters
Right.
in the country. Can we have environmentally friendly cements? At IIT Delhi, we initiated some activities, and they have developed cements which are like 30% lower in terms of their carbon emissions. And but then again, if these sort of technologies are implemented in the society, the
Hmm.
kind of saving which we will have in terms of carbon emissions will be humongous, because construction activity is there everywhere. But these sort of technologies need that support. If someone starts a company with these new cements, now someone has to support them, because getting into those sort of sectors, for a startup will be very difficult. And I think some of these I see identifying such problems which can have a large scale impact, and
Hmm.
then supporting these technology developments, and taking them all the way to the users. I think that can there lies the solution in meeting those the emission stand requirements and all of that, in my opinion.
And there also lies an opportunity for the marriage between, deep tech institutions like IITs and the B school institutions that probably specialize in making products commercially more viable, like e-commerce companies and so on. So maybe the way we said that we need to do the sustainability or, environmental impact assessment
Yeah,
for new
that's a good
products and new
point.
startups, just
It's a
vice versa, we can also do the commercial and market viability kind of support ecosystem can be, offered from the B schools towards these deep tech startups and
If
research.
you look at it, out of the 107 unicorns, there is not a single technology startup. There is not a single product startup. That tells the story. I mean,
That tells the
where
story.
our priorities currently lie, why not a single technology or product startup has made it to that list? I think that support is totally lacking for these startups. Now, there are great ideas floating around, but nobody, really is supporting them. And I think that those changes in policies, and I think for
Yeah,
these deep tech startups, it's very essential, from every point of view. Okay. Mhm.
definitely. Sure, sir. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to connecting soon again. Thanks a
Thank you
lot.
so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.